Hey everybody, it's been a while since I've dropped an episode. I'm excited to share this one with you. It's a presentation that I gave on November 9th, 2024 at the Thrive Day in Lehi, Utah. The name of my presentation was Being Caught, Catching Others, and Beyond. I hope you enjoy it.
I needed someone to catch me. I needed someone to catch me. It was June 2016. My dark night of the soul was more than one night. It happened night after night after night. 7 weeks in, by luck or divine providence, I stumbled across a Facebook group that is now called Waters of Mormon. Reddit was too sharp for me, so was Mormon Stories podcast community. I was crying myself to sleep most nights. I cried out into the void to the God who left the corner of the room where I always knew him, and he wasn't there. It was as if he had never existed in the first place. I didn't feel like myself, like a hollow person. I didn't fully recognize the person in the mirror. My mind hatched plans as to how to end the suffering without leaving a mess for my wife so that she wouldn't have to sell our home. With desperation, I looked around me to try to find people who could help me, and I couldn't find anyone. My bishop, my stake president, not even my dear wife. I needed someone to catch me. I posted with vulnerability and introduction in what is now called Waters of Mormon. And like in the parable of the Good Samaritan, with me as the wounded traveler, members of that group reached out through the internet to hold me in my grief. The Samaritans, the apostates, they are the ones who reached out to me. It just so happened that a member of that group named Lindsay Hansen Park, that many of you know who she is, sent me this clumsy message on Facebook Messenger. I don't mean to intrude. She expressed, I'm not really a creeper, but I'm visiting my friend in Billings, Montana. Would you like to go to breakfast with me and my husband tomorrow morning? I was so grateful. So the next morning at an IHOP over pancakes, I told my full story in person for the very first time with someone who could fully hold it. Lindsay had heard hundreds, maybe thousands like mine, but she listened to my story as if it was the most important that she had ever heard. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't try to tell me I was wrong. She didn't try to reconcile the irreconcilable. She just offered a grace and a ministry of presence to listen to my story, to sit with me in my hole, in the mud of my experience. She told me, you've got this. You've got all the tools. It feels like you're sinking in quicksand, but you're actually not. You're standing on solid ground, and you have all the tools, and you get to decide what your future is gonna look like. And somehow I believed Lindsay. In psychology, they call what Lindsay did active listening. For people who are processing severe grief or trauma, just the fact of having a professional or a person to sit with you in your grief, in the hole, in the mud, and be with you and listen to you as you process what you're processing without trying to fix you or tell you you're wrong or interrupt, but be there with you. Active listening makes a significant difference to help people heal. Brené Brown calls this the ministry of presence and holding the hands of strangers. I didn't know what it was, but she gave me a temporary reprieve from my 7-week-long dark night of the soul. That night, my tears were of gratitude, different than every night of the 7 weeks before. I knew that what I experienced with Lindsay is something that I needed to be a part of. That presence, that willingness to hold space for where I was at. So I found myself about 5 weeks later driving to Salt Lake City from Billings, Montana, my home, to attend at first a dinner with members of that now called Waters of Mormon group at, I think it's the Daughters of Utah Pioneers building. And there were members of that group who, during the prior 5 weeks, messaged me and compelled me to call them. Bill Reel spent hours on the phone with me. He didn't know me from Adam. A dear friend in Utah named Dane compelled me to call him. He saw what I was going through. I met Dane. I met my new friend, Lehi Renshaw. I met others in person that had reached out to me online. My new friend, Lehi, I asked her in that dinner that evening, where I was super uncomfortable because Gina Colvin talked about the feminine divine. Like, we're not supposed to talk about this, right? I asked, will I feel it again? Will I feel God again? She said, I don't know, Anthony. Everyone's journey is different. But regardless, we are here for you. That's more of that ministering presence. That's more of holding hands with strangers. The following day, I attended a faith crisis support workshop with John DeLynn. It was called Mormon Transitions at the time. But also Gina Colvin and Thomas McConkie participated in that group. It was small. I figured that they didn't even raise enough money to cover the cost of the room, but I was grateful I was there. I was maybe one of 10. And they helped me heal. I shared things in that faith crisis workshop that I hadn't told anyone because they were so sacred to me. But I had to try to figure out what those things were, and they helped me heal. For the balance of the work, I attended the Salt Lake City Sunstone Symposium, and I went to every session I could related to what I had been experiencing. And I found more of that ministering presence, strangers who held my hand, and they held me in their arms, just like Lindsay did. And things began to shift inside of me as that active listening, as that ministering presence, and as strangers held me in their arms, and my heart began to heal from the trauma. And I began once again to experience transcendent connection and grace in my being. But it was too triggering to call it God. But it was so good to feel this again. I knew that I needed to be part of this. I drove home from that week completely out of my 3-month-long dark night of the soul. I discovered there was an organization called Mormon Spectrum. It's similar to Thrive. Thrive has taken up the reins where Mormon Spectrum has slowed down. And there was a Mormon Spectrum group in Bozeman, Montana. It was a 2-hour drive for me. But I traveled there and I spent time with others who sat with me, who helped me heal, who helped me work through trying to figure out how to decondition and deprogram dualistic thinking that was extraordinarily painful for me and for my mixed faith relationships. And they helped me. And so I had to figure out, what could I do? So I'm sorry for the busyness of this slide, but I want to cover the things on it. And if you want to take a picture of it so you don't have to take notes or anything to come back to it, I want to refer to a few of these things. I created a Mormon Spectrum support group in Billings, Montana. Some things that were super helpful for us is our focus on these Brene Brown principles, a ministry of presence, of holding the hands of strangers. I learned from studying Brene Brown that there's a difference between belonging and fitting in. I thought I had community in Mormonism, and I did. But the majority of my experience in Mormonism was actually fitting in. It wasn't belonging, because it was conditional on belief affirmation. But when I participated in support groups, I experienced people who didn't have an agenda of where my individual faith journey would end. They would support me whether I reconstructed some nuanced belief where I could participate in the church, like my dear friend Jana Spangler, or like Thomas McConkie, or if I decided that I was a hardcore anti-theist or atheist, or any place in between. There wasn't an agenda. I could belong. And I learned that that's what I wanted. Now, a few things, I'll go through this quickly, is I found that there are support groups that don't endure. And support groups that don't endure seem to be focused on not having a common myth or a connecting story, an identity for the group. Trauma bonding can be helpful, sure, absolutely. But that is not a basis for a long-term support community. Testing behavioral boundaries, trying to figure out whether you like beer or how many drinks, you shouldn't drive kind of thing. That can be helpful, but a group needs to be more than that. Our group in Billings, Montana is called Yellowstone County, or Mormon Spectrum Yellowstone County. And our connecting myth is that we catch people. That's what we do. Often a support group is a mirror of the creator of the group and the leaders of the group. I needed to be caught, so I created a group to catch other people. My first co-leader, Sarah Hughes Zabawa, professional licensed therapist, works with Natasha Helfer in Symmetry Solutions. Also, she is amazing at catching people. That's our connecting myth. One thing that I've learned in our group is the reason this connecting myth resonates so strongly and helps our group endure now 8 years later is because there were moments of catching people in Mormonism that were the best parts. When your neighbor's child was in an accident, when the widow's house burnt down, we caught people. That's what we did. And we do that now in our group today. We were able to harvest catching people without the dogma. And we continue, and it's connecting. And even people who attend our group who are nuanced believers, bishopric members, people with state callings, who don't have literal belief, they experience the value, the this of catching people. They witness it, they participate in it, and they get it themselves. Now there's some more things. We have an in-person group and we have an online group. The online group, we banter back and forth. Sometimes we meet on Sunday mornings for coffee, particularly if it's general conference or state conference. Once a month, we have an in-person meetup. We have protocols. We are not recruiting people to have a faith crisis. We vet people before they enter our group. They have to agree to our protocols, and we need to make sure that we're not triggering a faith crisis for them. That's our identity. Part of our protocols are confidentiality. The identities of the members of the group, as well as the content of the conversations, are to be held strictly confidential without explicit permission otherwise. And just as has been mentioned in other places and conversations here today, one thing that has been extraordinarily helpful in our group is to model non-dualistic thinking. More than half of the members of our group have been in mixed faith marriages or are still in mixed faith marriages, and modeling non-dualistic thinking and relationships across differentiation of belief have been very important. So what's the beyond? There are some men at this table right here and this table right here. Stand up for a second. Don't take all my time. They're in a group called Ex Modo, and I joined this group. It's a small group. There are only 17 of us. We have a Marco Polo channel. We banter back and forth. We go on rides together. You see a picture of 10 of us on a ride where we rode through Glacier National Park. Below the picture, there's a device called a Senna. It's a device that you connect to your helmet, so as you're going on a ride, you're bantering the whole time. You think women can be chatty? Ex Modo, we're chatty. So part of the beyond is to have a group where you have a connecting activity or a connecting myth that's more than just about catching people. It's about sharing experiences, about being there when one of us needs someone to sit with them, when I need someone to sit with me, whether it's video online or a lunch or a dinner or a ride up Immigration Canyon or multiple days through Western Montana. That's what we do. And part of building ongoing community is to build these small groups. One of the reasons that our Mormon Spectrum group in Yellowstone County works so well is even though we have more than 130 members, our meetups generally only have about 15 or fewer people. So our protocol is we have enough time in our 3-hour block, meeting at 7, going past 10 sometimes. Everyone gets a chance to talk. And it's a small enough group that there's a degree of intimacy that even the introverts can participate and feel comfortable in the conversation. The beyond small groups need to be small enough, this is my view, that everyone gets a chance to talk and there aren't people that dominate the conversation all the time. And we need beyond large groups. These are events like General Conference, but better. Where we get together in a meeting like this, where we get to see people that we haven't seen for a long time, good friends, that when we see them, it's like not a day has passed that we've hugged each other. And there are things with Thrive conferences and Thrive days. There are Sunstone symposiums. There's the Lost and Found Club for women and individual, basically other than men, with Faith Journey meetups. Marriage on a Tightrope has events. They have programs where they do workshops with Natasha Helfer. Delyn and others still do faith crisis support workshops related to the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis podcast. There need to be larger groups and there needs to be smaller groups in order to build community going forward. So how do we build community? I think we need to figure out what is our identity? What is our common connecting myth? How are we going to hold the hands of strangers? How are we going to have active listening and ministering presence? How are we going to have boundaries, but without the complexities of fitting in instead of belonging? How do we have protocols where we have privacy, where we're LGBTQ allies, or where we don't rail on people by their gender? Whether it's men or women, we don't rail on people by their gender. How do we hold space for and model differentiation and non-dualistic thinking? It takes practice. It's messy. Sometimes we make mistakes. But sometimes we do things like adopt a family for Christmas. We do service for others. We help people move without dogma. Thank you.